really think that we can hide our sin from God. I want to read the 139th Psalm from Eugene Peterson's The Message. God, investigate my life. Get all of the facts firsthand. I'm an open book to you. Even from a distance, you know what I'm thinking. You know when I leave. You know when I get back. I'm never out of your sight. You know everything I'm going to say before I say the first sentence. I look behind me and you're there. Then up ahead and you're there too. Your reassuring presence coming and going. This is too much. It is too wonderful. I can't take it all in. Is there any place I can go to avoid your spirit, to be out of your sight? If I climb to the sky, you're there. If I go underground, you're there. If I flew on the morning's wings to the far western horizon, you'd find me in a minute. You're already there waiting for me. You shaped me first inside and then out. You formed me in my mother's womb. I thank you, high God. You are breathtaking. Body and soul, I am marvelously made. I worship in adoration. What a creation. You know me inside and out. You know every bone of my body. You know exactly how I was made bit by bit, how I was sculpted from nothing into something. Like an open book, you watched me grow from conception to birth. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to me. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offense in me and lead me in the way everlasting. We can never go where God is not present. That really is amazing. But this is where the story of Adam and Eve really is our story, isn't it? We mistrust God's love and goodness. We desire to be like God. We are filled with pain and shame for our guilt. We are aware of our brokenness with God and others. We blame someone else for all our mistakes. And when we do become aware of our sin, we would rather hide than come clean with it. Did I miss anything? If the psalmist is right, that God is already there ahead of us, then why in the world do we hide in the garden with Adam and Eve? If God already knows me and loves me as I truly am, why do I try to avoid being in relationship with God, who very clearly wants to be in relationship with us? Philip Yancey, in his book, Prayer, said that he was teaching a class when a young woman raised her hand. She said, "I'm not always sincere when I pray. Sometimes it seems forced, more like a ritual. I'm just repeating words. Does God hear those words? Should I keep going even though I have no confidence that I'm doing right?" And Yancey said he let the silence sort of hang for a few minutes. And he finally said, "Do you notice how quiet it is in here? Because we've all sensed your honesty. It took courage for you to be vulnerable. You touched a nerve with others of us in this room. You're sincere. You're tuned in, listening, respectful, because you are being authentic." And he said, "I imagine it's the same thing with God. More than anything else, God wants our authentic self. How do we be honest with God, who already knows us better than we know ourselves? How do we be honest with ourselves, knowing that God already knows us better than we know ourselves? All of this is leading me to a second type of prayer that I want us to play with today. And it's called the prayer of examine. Before you freak out over the word examine, yes, it does come from the Latin word for examination, but it means an accurate assessment of the true situation. In a prayer of examine, it doesn't mean that we're supposed to root out all the evil and sin that we have hiding in ourselves so that we can properly confess it. Remember, God already knows our sin. There's nothing hidden from God. What the prayer of examine is about is that it offers us a way to see and remember how God has been present with us throughout the day, and then asks us how we have responded to God's love. For example, was the argument that you overheard your neighbors have last night a rude interruption to a quiet evening, or was it a suggestion, an urging from God that you might want to be a little more attentive to the pain and the loneliness of those around you? Was the glorious sunrise this morning and the noisy chatter of those idiot birds, God shouting about the wonders and the beauty of creation and inviting you to wake up and be a part of it? Or were we too sleepy and distracted to hear God's call to us? Have you ever noticed how often in the Bible we are urged to remember? Throughout the Old Testament, the Hebrew people are told to remember the covenant that God made with Abraham and Isaac. The Passover meal was to remind the people of the Exodus and of the mighty works of God to lead them from Egypt into the promised land. What is it that we're supposed to do with the Sabbath and keep it holy? Remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. In just a few minutes, we're going to remember the sacrifice of Jesus when he said, "Do this in remembrance of me." Throughout the Bible, we are to remember the mighty acts of God. And in this prayer of examine, we remember the presence of God. We remember the mighty acts of God. We remember and we respond. So again, we're going to spend a little bit of time in quiet, similar to what we did last week. But I'm going to ask you to be a little more focused in this time of quiet, in this prayer of examine. St. Ignatius of Loyola was really big on this prayer of examine, and he had 5 steps that you move through when he taught this discipline. And the first one was to become aware of the presence of God, similar to what we did last week of just sitting quietly and breathing in and breathing out. Be still and know that I am God. The second was, in that quiet and in that stillness, review the last 24 hours. What went on yesterday? And the third step, he said, also, as you're reviewing the last 24 hours, think about the emotions that you had in the different things that happened during the day. And this fourth step was, as you're reviewing all of this, sort of focus on one item, one thing, and pray about that one thing. Pray through that one thing. And then as you're wrapping up, he says to look forward to tomorrow. I threw something at Dalton this morning and asked him if he can put these 5 things up on the screen so that I can pray through them while you are praying through them and I don't have to talk. So in the next few minutes, again, we're going to go through this probably quicker than St. Ignatius would want us to, but that's okay. God forgives us anyway. But go through those steps, and we will come quietly out of that in just a few minutes. Be still and know that I